The Fed chair was back on Capitol Hill today, where he sent strong signals that the central bank is ready and able to cut interest rates this month. Steve Liesman has more from Washington.
Fed Chairman Jay Powell's visit to Capitol Hill on day two was a lot like day one, where he affirmed the market's view that rate cuts are likely coming at the end of July. But he also provided maybe a little context for how much the Fed might cut in July or even beyond.
You don't want to get behind the curve and let inflation drop well below 2%, because what happens is you get into this unhealthy dynamic potentially where lower expected inflation gets baked into interest rates, which means lower interest rates, which means less room for the central bank to react. And that becomes a self-reinforcing thing. We've seen it in Japan. We're now seeing it in Europe. And that's why we think it's so important that we defend our 2% inflation goal here in the United States.
A Federal Reserve that's concerned about being behind the curve like Europe and Japan might be one that cuts more deeply than it otherwise might, trying to use what bullets it has to reduce rates more effectively. Stocks liked what Powell said today, in part because it removed any potential risk that he might reverse himself from day one. Also, Powell tended to ignore stronger economic data, both the inflation data and stronger jobless claims numbers, which fell by 13,000. That means the economic data may not matter all that much if the concerns are trade uncertainties, global economic weakness, and inflation that's been running persistently below the Fed's 2% target. Then the data may not deter the Federal Reserve from what looks like an inevitable rate cut at the end of this month. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Liesman in Washington.